From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. There are so many factors that impact the well-being of law enforcement officers, from wellness topics and developmental content to organizational expectations and social connections. RippleWorks solves that problem by providing anonymous check-ins, so each officer can get exactly what they need and want for prime performance, while agencies learn in real time how their people are doing through analytic dashboards. Take a look at RippleWorks today at www.rippleworks.com and schedule a demo. That's RippleWorks, WORX.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tum. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Kathy Vargas. I retired as a captain from the Virginia Beach Sheriff's Office last year, and I'm a proud graduate of the FBI National Academy, Session 271. I currently work as a business development manager at Off Duty Management and as a strategic alliance partner of the FBI National Academy Association, who's hosting this webinar. Off Duty Management selected a topic that we feel will help agencies around the country. We hear about this frequently, which is staffing shortages. The title is Empty Seats, Heavy Burdens, the Law Enforcement Staffing Challenge. And our panelists are going to discuss retention and recruitment. And I'd like to encourage attendees to use the chat. You all are muted, but use the chat to ask questions. We'll be monitoring that. And sending out a recording later to those who registered who couldn't attend. And it will also be posted on Off Duty Management's website under resources, articles, and presentations. So our first panelist is Eric Tum. Eric is a police commander and has served as a police officer for over 18 years in Washington State. He currently oversees patrol operations and his department's wellness and peer support programs. He has led and innovated recruiting, hiring, training, community engagement, and personnel development programs. Many of you may know him from his podcast, Blue Grit Radio, which he develops police wellness and leadership content on, and he's a regular contributor to Police One. Welcome. Our next panelist is Greg Zaroslinki. Greg served in the military for over 10 years. He supported many joint operations while overseas. When Greg returned stateside, he took his passion for serving the Navy recruiting district in Phoenix, where he was named Rookie Recruiter of the Year and subsequently finished as the #2 recruiter in the nation. Greg has been recognized as a leader in the entrepreneurial world as the 2021 Entrepreneur of the Year runner-up and is a member of the Entrepreneur Organization. Greg has built several successful businesses while continuing to stay connected to his passion of serving through coaching and recruitment. Greg has been featured as a keynote for many institutions with his TRY, which is Take Responsibility Yourself, and CAN'T, Capable, Able, or Not Trying campaigns. Greg's unwavering belief of service before self is a direct reflection of how he leads his life, his family, and those he serves. His purpose is to work each day to be the best version of himself while enriching the lives of others. Welcome, Greg. The last panelist is Chief Travis Koltiska. Travis is the Chief of Police of Sheridan Police Department in Wyoming and a fellow graduate of the FBI National Academy Session 271. Travis started his career in law enforcement with the Wheatland Police Department in 1995. Travis has extensive experience teaching as an adjunct instructor with the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy, focusing on firearms and officer survival. He has served as chief since November 2000, has a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminal justice, and became a subject matter expert in data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. He teaches agencies around his region on the implementation of these principles during his time as the operation lieutenant. And he has recently experienced firsthand success regarding our topic and from our conversations. And I know he has a humble approach to leading his agency. So retention is one of the pressing issues that our panelists and I have talked about facing law enforcement today. You know, we talk about stopping the bleed before we go bring others in. We're going to explore these challenges and talk a little bit about those innovative solutions that are available. So we're going to talk about retention. I will pose this question to Eric first. What do you see as a big factor driving officers to leave the profession today? What would you say is a contributing factor?
These are huge topics. And I think everything, whether we're talking about recruitment, retention, development, morale, we're just talking about culture. And I don't mean we're just talking about culture like it's this one thing, but culture is everything. It's how every single member of the department or the agency and community interact together. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. It's why you do it. It's your mission. It's your personal mantra, right? So it's all these things intertwined. It's the byproduct of wellness, and it contributes to wellness. So it's why are we doing this thing? How are we doing it? Do we want to be doing it? And so it directly impacts, and it creates this dynamic of whether people want to stay in this organization or they want to leave, whether they want to stay in this profession or they want to leave.
Very good. Chief, do you see anything at your agency that supports what Eric says, or do you see anything different?
No, I think Eric's spot on, and I think to capitalize on that as well, I think we fail to sell our victories too often. And so we're not able to articulate correctly what benefits, what we can provide in this career, what self-satisfaction. There's a lot of driving factors with people who are looking for their career choices. And that internal intrinsic motivation has got to be a key factor. And if you can't sell the victories in law enforcement, all we see across the national spectrum is law enforcement has done inappropriate things. And we are sometimes our own worst enemies because we don't condone that, and we don't implement that's not the appropriate actions for law enforcement. So we really, but even though we don't condone it, I still say we do not celebrate our victories enough. We need to be more vocal in the victories in law enforcement and what we do for our communities, whether it's social media platforms, whether it's traditional news outlets, and get people interested in the career again, get them driven to want to be. It's almost a marketing campaign. And if you can find that marketing manager, that's where we need the direction we need to go.
Greg, you're our outsider from the law enforcement, even though obviously in your current position, you work around first responders all the time. What's your thoughts on that retention piece?
Yeah, I think both, Eric and Chief are spot on. Interesting enough, I was just on the phone yesterday with the colonel from Wyoming Highway Patrol, and Tim and I were talking about this exact issue. And one of the things that came to light was exactly what Chief was talking about, is around, hey, we don't have to look far to find bad news. Bad news travels quickly, good news doesn't travel at all. And I think that piece around, kind of going back to where Eric was, leading is, the motivation versus inspiration. So people think that, hey, our job is to motivate individuals to do X. Well, truth be told, we can't motivate anyone to do anything. We can inspire them to want to engage. We can inspire them to want to ignite that flame that exists inside each and every one of them. But at the end of the day, they have to take personal ownership. And I think a lot of people do want to take ownership. And I think where where I see it across the country is, how do you navigate that? Where are the proverbial navigational beacons that they can hone in on, and what programs make sense for them, and how do they actually utilize them, and do they actually utilize them? Because truth be told, and depending on what study or census you look at or what information you're consuming, around 11% of people inside of an agency will use anything inside a wellness program. That's a problem. So when you look at it in isolation and say, hey, how do we change that? Well, we have to inspire them to want more, to want to engage for themselves. And I think that's part of the issue that every agency is faced with is, hey, what can we position in front of them that is going to be of interest, but more importantly, actually useful. And if we start looking at everything from the people perspective, I think you're going to start to get a lot more ideation towards it. Therefore, you're going to start to see people get happier, healthier, and ultimately have longer careers and better longevity inside of the industry that, hell, we know is it's difficult. I see it every single day, and I get a chance to be inspired by it every single day, which keeps me coming back. And thank you for having me here. And more importantly, I see a bunch of names on the screen that I know and recognize. And hey, good to see you guys. So yeah, that's my take on it, Kathy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And so that goes two different ways. Let's go back to peer support or wellness component. And I know, Eric, you've got a ton of experience. I did a lot with my peer support team. It is hard to get those percentages up where your staff are using those resources. Have you found success in creating a program to help your officers at your agency?
Fortunately, I came into a very supportive peer support culture. We had a policy and a program established for quite some time before I came into the agency, but being able to contribute towards that, it's I guess like what I want to draw a comparison to is we talk about culture, and we started with this really high level concept, and it's not something we fix, right? Like peer support is not something we fix. It's something we have to feed, we have to nurture it, we have to prune it sometimes. If you have the wrong person in peer support, that's going to absolutely devastate and sink your whole program if they're gossiping or they're saying something that was privileged and they're not supposed to be talking about it. And so it is like a degree of accountability to everything, right? There's a degree of accountability to wellness, to peer support, to culture, to this concept of developing your people and retaining them. Even to go back to the prior conversation, right? Like a peer support program is not anything without the people that are practicing it the right way, right? So it doesn't matter if you have a policy, it doesn't matter if you have a program, if it's on paper, like your mission on the walls of your department are only words unless you do something with them. And that goes right into this conversation of recruiting and retention. So it's just, I mean, I'm going ahead a little bit when we get to recruiting, but with retention, how are you recruiting people if people don't even want to be there? I mean, we saw this in 2019, 2020, 2021, where when my department recognized we needed to switch something up and I got to be a part of that team, we recognized that cops were some of our own worst enemies in the recruiting and retention efforts. When people went to go ask somebody, and even though the media and the politicians and all the national public opinion scrutiny was saying, don't be a cop, I would never be a cop, people are asking their family members to reevaluate, but so many cops would say the same thing. And we actually took advantage of that because a lot of people came in after they were told by an officer that they grew up with saying, don't do this job. And rather than go to that person's agency, they came to ours. And we said, yeah, the job is not fun at times. It is extremely challenging, but that's why we signed up in the first place, right? So I just kind of want to share that example as like some way to think about all of this because it is a lot. These are huge, huge topics to tackle in an hour.
Yeah, and wellness it's not just peer support, right? It's what Greg mentioned. And I know, Travis, we've talked about it as well in our previous conversations with, the physical fitness aspect, and really leading yourself and keeping all those pillars of health up and everything like that. As chief, you're doing this right now. You're the boots on the ground, leading an organization. Is that hard to lead from the top with fitness and having the right peer support, using resources like what Greg has helped you?
Yes, there's obviously challenges associated with all of those things, but it's finding that balance and identifying what's important and what's going to help with the health of your people within your organization. we've implemented policies for both physical fitness on duty as well as rest policies. But it's when you're talking to small agencies such as mine, I have 31 allocated, and obviously I'm here because of recruitment and retention, so we're short a few. It presents even more challenges and some of the struggles that are associated with being short-staffed. You still have to find that balance, and you still, like we've all said, we have to stop that bleed. That was one of the first things. That's goal number one, and that will contribute once you're able to do that. That will contribute to the ability to get inspiration within your own within your group to be that voice for the profession. I think it was said at one point that this most recent that I heard was 60% of surveyed current law enforcement officers would not recommend the profession to anyone. 60% was the last statistic I heard. That is not helping. We have got to change the culture within our organization to bring the goodness back to our purpose and our mission, and focus on our individuals and help them want to be that voice for our profession. And there's lots of ways to do it. Yeah, there's challenges associated, whether it's financial, whether it's staffing, whatever it is. But there are mechanisms, and we're working through it on our smaller agency, and it's not an overnight fix. That's what I can't stress enough. We're seeing the slow creep, and we're seeing the advancements that are coming now from some of our recent initiatives. But it doesn't happen overnight. And anybody that knows this, they've been in this profession for any period of time, knows from the initial application to full duty, we're talking over a year just to get them operationally viable. At least that by the time you're talking academy and FTO and everything else. So we need to have patience, and we need to not jump too far and too fast from initiative to initiative. Find what works and work on the people that you have, and it was just kind of that building block, right?
Absolutely. Well said, because I think there's something to be said there from your small organization, the resources available and the need to tap in. I think people sometimes are afraid to ask for help, like they think it's a sign of weakness, whether it's peer support or whether it's just leading. Help means you want to fight and you want to stay in the game, right? And so, Greg, I think, stepping in with the coaching and with what you're doing, can you talk a little bit about some of the resources available?
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing I want to quickly jump back to what Eric said, because it strikes a chord in a good way. And you got to have the right people in the right spot when it comes to the peer support and all your wellness initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. Because one of the things that can become cancerous is if you plug in that wrong individual. So I always go, operationally speaking, is it's GWC. It's get it, want it, and have the capacity. Do they get it and understand what the initiative is for and what the need is for that particular program or programming? Do they want it? Is it something they want to actually be a part of? And then do they have the capacity, meaning with ancillary and auxiliary duties? Is this something that they can actually take and operationalize? Because one of the things that we see all the time is that becomes the inroad to success for the agency from a wellness standpoint. If that person is well liked, well respected, and I know Eric, personally, and at the end of the day, he's done a fantastic job at his organization. Then people are going to ideate towards it. So the days of it being stigmatized, I think, quickly get riddled out of the equation when you have somebody in that role or those roles that ultimately people look up and aspire to be like. If you create that model, you can create the mold that you can continue to churn and churn and churn each and every individual. As far as resources go, I mean, there's a ton of programming out there. I mean, everyone has seen it. You don't have to look far to find an opportunity of, hey, get into something. Doing nothing is no longer an option. So now you have to look and say, hey, what is the next best thing, or what is the next thing for us if we haven't tried something? One, try some different things. I would encourage agencies, hey, get a little bit creative, because it's not necessarily thinking so outside the box. And somebody said something to me the other day, said, hey, increase the capacity of your own box. You don't have to necessarily throw everything out with the bathwater. But at the end of the day, start to get creative. And what we've been doing and had really, really tremendous success to the tune of, 81% decrease in ideation towards quitting the industry or quitting their agency is performance coaching, is opening the door to, hey, giving someone the opportunity to get an outside third party involved in, their life, not as an officer, not training them how to be an officer, but letting them be human and letting them want more as a human. And therefore you have happier, healthy individuals that ultimately the byproduct becomes a happier, healthier organization. And that becomes sticky. So then going back to what Eric talked about again, is pulling it back, full scope is, dragging that culture all the way through. And creating that inroad and giving them the opportunity, because it's not somebody in their life or in their agency that's telling them to do something. It's somebody that's inspiring them to want to engage, to get better, to be better, and to do better, and do it for themselves. And then when it becomes self-oriented, then they become organized towards what you're looking for from a culture standpoint.
Awesome. I would ask this, if you all could implement one major change tomorrow that would improve retention, what would it be?
I'd love to jump in, going right off of what Greg said, right? And he's talking about development, right? He's talking about coaching, and all of the most effective people I know, and I'm sure there's going to be some head shaking at the faces I can't even see, but everyone who's effective has a lot of mentors and coaches and leaders and teachers that they can cite in and out of law enforcement, in and out of your profession. And so what is going to make people stay? And we talk about messaging and mission, we talk about purpose, is people feeling value. Like that's a human desire, a human need to feel like they are contributing something. And the agencies are struggling. It's officers feeling that they're spinning their wheels and they're not told anything and they're not shown anything that would contradict that. Right? Earlier this week, I was talking on leadership and wellness up north in my state, and it's this concept of what both guests and Kathy has also nodded to today as well, which is that ownership piece, right? It's personal accountability. But we as agencies and leaders need to be accountable to our people. We say, yes, we want you. We select few. So few people can actually make it through the gauntlet that is hiring and recruiting and all these things. And now we want to do this extremely impactful job, this calling, we call it, right? But then if we're not investing and we're taking the time to show them demonstrably that this actually makes a difference, like all the things you risk, all the things you sacrifice, your health, your family time, the physical and emotional danger, and we don't actually show them what it is doing, then we are failing them, and they have no logical choice but to leave, right? So that value can come in hearing their voice, letting them be a contributing member, development, which is what Greg talked a lot about and what Chief talked a lot about, right? Showing them that they matter and we are going to contribute our piece to make you the best we can, give you the framework. You got to do it, right? You got to do the work, but we will show you the way. And that's what mentorship and coaching really is. And again, just showing that their work matters, because people that left, it's because they lost that spark. They know why they came in, but sometimes we have to remind them why they came in.
Thank you, Eric.
And I will add to that we are implementing a coaching program, and I think that focusing on that career development, I talked about earlier, that internal satisfaction that one must achieve in their career. That is going to be, I think, one of the most important keys for retention is it, like Eric said, it's that value that they find with this profession, but that comes from both outside and inside. You got to find that balance of both. People can say this, I don't do this because of what people think, but everyone on this that's listening right now can say when they get negative feedback, there is a little bit of a chip at the ego at that point, right? So I'm really focusing in my agency that when we have, again, those victories, highlighting those victories, when an officer does excellent work with the recovery of a stolen property or investigates a violent crime, and they hold the offender accountable for it, we highlight that as much as we can get out there without compromising any kind of case status and all that. We put that officer's picture and we say they did a fantastic investigation, and we just give them that, you did great, right? That builds that satisfaction. But also, where do they want to take their career progression? It can be challenging. Again, I'll talk on the small agency side of things again. There's limited opportunities for advancement sometimes when you're talking a smaller agency. All agencies, let's face it, there's limited opportunities for advancement in our hierarchy. But we need to remind people that success in this profession doesn't mean necessarily they have to promote. There's other opportunities for success, and highlight what those are. And I think that's where that coaching and that mentoring is like, some of the most phenomenal officers I ever worked with were officers their entire career because they invested everything in their ability to be the best officer they could be. And that's where they were motivated to work hard. And, I encourage as much training as possible. Comes back to that whole staffing issue, that vacancies, it's hard to backfill a hole in the schedule if you to get people to training to get for that career advancement. It's all kind of the snowball effect. But that's really what I'm working on, is that performance coaching. Let's look and see where they want to take them in that development, as well as let's highlight these victories, and let's get that good news out there, and let's give them that recognition that they deserve. And we don't do this for recognition, but our officers, our people deserve the recognition for the hard work.
I think it's important what you said about career development. And everybody thinks, well, that means, we're going to do it for promotion, right? And that's the only way you're successful. But that's such a critical topic to point out, that not everybody wants to be or meant to be in that advance, but there's other leadership internal roles, whether you're a field training officer or instructor or the peer support team. There's vital components, and it's important to keep all of them motivated to be in the job and taking care of themselves in different aspects. So we'll transition from the retention side now and into recruitment. I think we've got a lot of energy around that topic. I mean, I know we could go on for a long time with this, but have you ever seen a case, any of you, where you are focusing on the retention and getting that piece right, but it actually improves recruitment? What are your thoughts on that side? Eric's already hit on it a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose I'll start with where I was when I was in recruiting, and I started talking to my boss when I was given the baton a little bit about retention. He's like, you got a big enough job with recruiting. Retention is our shared job. And I love that, right? It is literally every person in the organization, every person in the agency, they have a role in recruitment and retention, right? So it's like, how are we doing the job? Do we want to be here, right? And then with recruiting, the same thing, right? So if we recognize that we have opportunities to get people aligned and this is a cool place to be. And so going back to when I was in recruiting, I recognized that it's not about the recruiter, it's not about the background, it's about everybody, right? So reaching out and finding those informal leaders. Chief kind of spoke on it, right? Leadership is not about rank, absolutely not. It's about role and how they self-define, how they take on that role. Because I would also submit that some of the best leaders have zero rank because they have no rank to compel the actions that they're looking for. They just have pure inspirational, as Greg said, influence, right? And so hopefully I answered your question a little bit, that these things are absolutely intertwined. And when you have people that are improving and actively improving their own morale, their own ownership of their purpose, why they do the job, that does get contagious, right? It gets contagious in a positive way. It affects their patrol partners. It affects up their sergeant, right? Leading up and on and on and on. And really, it may sound cheesy, but if everyone just did a little bit of that, right? If we could nudge that a little bit and find these influential kind of these early adopters throughout the agency, then we could have that kind of spider web out, and then you're going to have all the solutions that you need because you have the valuable people. You have a huge team. You just need to try to coordinate them.
Awesome. Travis, you mentioned a very similar piece when you talked about learning that recruiting is everybody's responsibility. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we've learned recently. I guess it should seem obvious and it should have been recognized a long time ago, but I had heard in past years, it's like the administration's not doing anything to fill these spots. Everything gets thrown back on the administration when it comes to hiring. Yes, we are ultimately responsible for the hiring, but we can't be the only ones that are out there actively trying to bring individuals into the organization. I'd say I'd actually shift that and say that it is more incumbent upon line level and first line supervisory personnel to be those recruiters. So we need to empower our people and help them understand that this job takes an entire department to actively bring new individuals who are going to be positive fits within our organization. There are always there always seems to be a number of percentage of individuals who want to come to this organization, but it's finding that who's the one that's going to fit our organization. Eric's organization and my organization are going to have different, maybe slightly different fits to it. So they're the ones that have the most interaction with the general public. They're going to have the most interactions with, different organizations and support organizations that are also going to be that recruiter for your department. And so it's very incumbent upon our to empower all personnel within an organization. I'm not saying administrations to shift that responsibility off your shoulders. That's not what I'm saying. It's everybody's, and you need to empower your people to do so. And to capitalize on that, and Greg may talk about it in a minute, but give them the tools to do that. It's not just tell them, you need to go out and do that. Teach them how to do it. We don't hire somebody new and expect them to go interrogate somebody who's just committed a homicide and get a confession, right? We provide them with every tool that we can to teach them how to be good interviewers and interrogators. And after they've practiced it in time, then they're going to become proficient. So give them the tools, give them the training to be that voice for your organization. And I think that's going to be key. We've implemented some of this process right now, and yeah, we're seeing some upward traction, and it's uplifting, right? To see that upward momentum. When you start seeing that, it's contagious.
So I hear getting everybody to stay, right? Making those satisfied, retained officers and who then go out and help recruit and attract people for your agency. You talk about tools, since Greg, you're the one who's worked with Travis, helping him with these tools. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so Chief stole my thunder. So I think there's a number of things. I mean, first things first is it's fit versus fill. I mean, everybody on this call knows and understands that, hey, this job isn't for everybody. And you don't want everybody, and you certainly don't want somebody you have to convince to do the job. But the interesting piece to all of this, I think those of you on the call, if you looked at the industry and your agency in isolation, what is the one thing that you can do inside of your agent, the only thing that you can do inside of your organization that you don't have to be trained to do? It's recruiting. So when you think about that, wait a second, this doesn't make much sense. I mean, you can't use a stapler without training. You can't. There's literally nothing you can do without training. Yet we know that staffing cures all evils. It cures morale. It cures a lot of things, and it can create a better culture. Yet we're not putting any stock into, hey, like, how are we operationalizing this? Like, how are we empowering individuals to go out and have candid conversations and convert those conversations into contracts and bona fide assets and resources for the organization? That has been, that was a huge issue for me on the front end. I spent about 1.5 years, 2 years on the road, traveling around to find out, like, hey, what's actually going on in recruitment? Like, why are people, why is this crisis continuing to escalate? And that was the one thing I found was, hey, nobody's being trained to do this. So it's basically somebody gets handed a cell phone. They say, hey, we're down 100 bodies. We're down 50 bodies. Go get them, Tiger. And that's it. And then you got the convoluted process around the background and everything else. Then you have some agencies have self-service, some agencies HR controls everything. Like, there's all these mechanisms that are in play that you have this system that's chaotic and confusing, and then the byproduct becomes you have individuals that unfortunately can't activate. So how do we optimize them? How do we strategize to work to get them to know and understand what recruiting is, what recruiting isn't, and then activate them? Because every agency I've been to, and I'm blessed with the ability to travel all around the country and work and train with agencies. And the same thing comes to the equation, which is like what Chief said. The writing's on the wall. It's not difficult, but you have to understand it to then go operationalize it. I'm always so impressed with Eric, because Eric actually gets what I'm talking about, and he has actually done it and then done it successfully. So not only, this isn't just me saying that, hey, we know that this works. This is a bunch of people that I've seen across the country, that agencies that are now finally doing it, they're getting the upward momentum, but more importantly, filling the coffers with highly qualified young men and young women to then pass the baton to. So it's frustrating, and from the standpoint of me being, I would say, outsider, but like not inside the agency that I'm working with, any agency I'm working with, to look at it and say, hey, this isn't that hard. And it's not that hard from the standpoint of, as long we have these wonderful assets and these wonderful resources, as long we train them up, we know that every single person that's in the industry they can take an SOP, they can take processes and procedures, and when given them, and then go out and produce effectively. So now, how do we empower them? How do we operationalize those individuals? And whether it's through training or at least nothing else, just talking about it instead of at a high level, saying, "Hey, we have these deficits, we have these deficiencies. We're missing here, we're missing here, we're missing here." That's great. Let's get solution oriented and start to find and organize a strategy that can work for every agency. Because yes, as Chief noted, every agency is going to be dynamically a little bit different. But guess what? It's not different. The people that we're looking for. The people that we're looking for is going to remain consistent across the board. You want physically fit, you want smart, you want operationally capable, you want all those things. So it goes back to the GWC, get it, want it, capacity. Do they get it and understand it? Do they want to do it? And do they have the capacity? Now, then it's about putting them into the system and then let the process dictate whether they are or are not your brothers and sisters. I don't know if that helped.
That was great. And actually somebody in the chat said excellent. So there you go. So when it comes to, you talked a little bit about some of these, I think we'll dive a little bit deeper, when it comes to attracting new candidates, the strategies that worked when Travis and I came in, maybe not so much Eric yet, he's getting there, came in the door, do they need to look different today than what happened in the past? What are your thoughts?
Are you asking me? Because I could go on about this, but I know Eric is super.
Go ahead, take it.
I
go ahead, Eric.
Sorry. I will say that they need to be different, and the agencies that are not getting traction have not tried anything different. They have not adapted. One of the big things that helped me in my recruiting, I suppose, management, was thinking back to my experience. And so 19-ish, whatever years ago, I remember specifically there were agencies that made me feel like I was valued. They wanted to get to know me as a person. They wanted me to learn about them as an agency and a group of people. And then there are agencies that are more like, all right, jump through that hoop, jump through this hoop. When can you start? And I did not get a sense that anyone really liked to be there. When I was walking around, no one looked at me. No one looked at each other. No one was talking. And I came to see that I made a really good choice with the agency that I felt a connection with. And this is not crazy. It was just a bit of customer service, a bit of being yourself. And that's the individual, like the LT that I met. That was the officers, the FTOs I rode along with. They didn't have like a script. They weren't all acting the same, but they were acting like themselves. And I came to find that that was actually accurate as I started working there and getting to know them better, right? And it wasn't this old traditional kind of model of like prove yourself, right? They let the process, as Greg said, like they let that dictate whether I was proving myself or not. And when I was showing up, they let me invest, and they were investing both ways, right? Whereas the other agency in my region, I went with a gut call that this was not a good fit. And I saw through years, people continued to leave that agency, right? And so recruitment continued to be an absolute struggle. Fast forward 15 years when I was running recruiting, and I hear that the chief there gave a candidate an ultimatum, said, you have until tomorrow to let me know if you want to work here or not, knowing that I wouldn't have time to get my package finalized. But this is how you're treating people. This is how you're signaling how you're going to treat them as an employee when they're a candidate, right? So these things are all intertwined. And to kind of wrap it all back up, yes, we need to think more dynamically. We need to be about the person, because we do want to hire really good people. So let's learn about those people and let's show who we are as people, not try to all act like we're the same. We all have the same specialties. We're all the same department. Absolutely not. A day-to-day job at my agency is absolutely different than a day-to-day job at Chiefs. But if we are honest and transparent about that, then the right people will find their place and space where they need to be and where they will belong.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. And when I came into this line of work, you almost felt like a number because you were a number. You were competing against hundreds of candidates for one or two positions. And so it was kind of like law enforcement had a really good, it's like, hey, we'll let you come to us, and we need to be more dynamic is a great word. And we need to be reaching out. We can't just sit back and wait for the tide to roll in, right? We've got to be out there on the front line and being active. And that personal touch that Eric talked about, I think is absolutely necessary. And you know, you look at most administrators across the organizations now are probably Gen Xers, and we have to recognize generational differences. Not saying good, bad, otherwise, right? But we have to recognize them and accept them, that the new generations have more of a desire for that connection, even though they're connected on their phones from people across the world. There is still that personal connection. We have implemented where our special operations lieutenant, who's directly in charge of all testing and hiring processes and recruitment, he is the first point of contact, and he maintains a thorough point of contact until we move them into backgrounds, at which point they're assigned a mentor who's going to guide them through the mentorship process. And it's maintaining that personal contact through all from the first time anybody shows any interest in organization all the way through. We can't sit back and on our heels and let them come to us. We've got to maintain that contact and that personal touch.
Chief, would you say that changed from the time you've been in your seat for almost 5 years now? Has it shifted in those 5 years?
Yes, absolutely. And it's because we recognize that need, and it's been a slow progression. And we've recently got even more in depth with this process and how we're assigning, and that meant even early on in the background process, assigning that mentor, not just the background investigator, but another officer within the organization to guide them through the process, all through their academy time, all through their FTO. But even early on in the process, to maintain that personal contact, yeah, it has shifted in just my 5 years as chief, and it's shifted way in my 30 years, way ahead from my 30 years when I started in this line of work.
Greg, how about you I mean, you've been doing recruiting, even if it was in the military aspect. What shifts have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's tremendous. Just kind of maybe a quick history lesson to kind of pull it full circle. If you look at, kind of circa 93, 95, the feds threw a bunch of money into law enforcement, public safety, get everyone to staffing, overstaffing, et cetera. Since then, there's been really zero initiatives. So some organizations would kind of transition into, hey, let's, add some marketing, create some social media, et cetera, et cetera. But really what we've done is we've gone really, really broad because, hey, we think, hey, let's get more candidates, let's get more applicants. That's going to be better. And that's not actually the case. So dilution's not the solution. Don't dilute the quality of the product, but, trying to solve for a bigger issue. Now you're looking at it like, hey, how do we proactively get what we want? Well, when you have these big vacancies, you're casting this big broad net, which then clogs the system. So now you have people in background that should not be in background. You have all these things going on that is actually negatively impacting and influencing the process. So what we've designed, and I think, Eric and Chief are both on lockstep with me in this, is we have to get away from the dehumanization. Like now we're throwing everyone into a click funnel. Like, hey, let's send them to our website. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it's so distant from any sort of personal connection, personal contact. That dog's not going to hunt. That actually might have worked, 25, 30 years ago. It's not going to work now because we have to understand who are we dealing with. If you think about the current generation in their current capacity, they're the most disconnected generation of all time. They're connected to everything vis-a-vis their phones and tablets and computers and all that stuff, but they lack really, truly human connection. So how do you drive that back? Well, guess what? People want to work with people they know, like, and trust, and people want to work with the people that they want to be like. So why are we not putting those two together? So it's getting away from, hey, organizationally, let's get really broad with this. No, let's get very tactical with what we're doing and how we're doing it and why. We need to start putting eyes on targets and ultimately having intentional conversations that's going to allow them to ideate towards us. Because desperation yields an ugly head. If you are constantly and continuously desperate as an organization, you're going to start letting things infiltrate your agency that you wouldn't normally. And if you're having conversations, you're going to know immediately out the gate, is this person the right fit for us? It's fit versus fill. We don't have to worry about just trying to fill vacancies. Let's fit the organization. Let's fit the individual. Therefore, it's going to fit the culture, and everything is going to be nice and smooth across the board. That's where the paradigm shift needs to occur. We need to start getting more tactical about how we're handling this and how we're approaching it. Just because of the fact that what we're doing right now, let's just be honest, it's not working, and it's not working nearly as effectively or as quickly as we would like, and what the industry needs. Because national average is what I think the industry as a whole is down 17%, with another 41% slotted to retire in the next 36 to 48 months. You're looking at agencies that could have significant vacancies that they're not going to be able to work operationally or serve the communities that they're in. It's a real issue.
Yeah, and I think talking about desperation, we talked loosely last month when we were getting this all together, the lowering standards, which you mentioned, and throwing money at bringing people in. Are those solving the problem? I guess not, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
I'd love to jump in. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I did write down standards before you said it, Kathy, so thank you. We have to think about how these things are intertwined, just like we started in the conversation. So who we're hiring, who we're recruiting, are they contributing towards your retention problem? Fast forward, like worst case scenario, the things you see, the potential flags that you see in background, in demeanor, how they interact with folks, are we making the problem worse? And a lot of times we have to be honest, if we're reducing standards, they are. Are we making the future recruitment problem worse, or are we making the future retention problem worse? Because we are bringing this type of person in. We are saying we want this type of person in our culture. I'm not saying everyone has to be perfect, right? We want potential, we want values. You can't train values, right? And so that's, I think, so many people that come from a background, right? Working investigations, they know that. And a lot of command staff that sit on all these panels and review all these things, they know that. And then the trainers, the field trainers and the line officers that see these things and they see how people act, and they wonder when people don't work out in FTO because of attitude, or they do something a little sketchy, they wonder if there were these flags, and generally they are. Nothing's perfect, but we have to look at what these downstream effects might be. We are expert problem solvers and contingency planners, but a lot of times in police work, specifically patrol, where I spent the most of my time, it's short-term problem solving, if you can call it that, right? It's using tactics for how do we make it better than 5 minutes ago? How do we make it better than the next hour so we can go on to the next one? But we're not talking about long-term strategy, right? This person, once they get off probation, in many states, you're kind of stuck with them, right? And so are we hiring these people? Are we throwing money at the problem? Someone, a type of person that oftentimes I call like a mercenary, right? Where they're just a gun and a badge for hire. They're going here, they're going there, and sometimes they bring, and not all the time, but sometimes they bring a lot of issues with them. Or they're fine to do their job, but you just threw a lot of money at them. They're going to wait till their contract's up, and then they're on to the next one. Did that help anything, or did it hurt it?
Yeah, and standards are something you never compromise on. And that is going to be bringing that cancer to your organization. We always heard that, that word, there's a cancer in an organization. If you reduce your standards, you are bringing it purposely into your organization, and it will wreak havoc on your personnel in future years. I've seen it. And so we need to be very, very cautious of that. And those agencies who have reduced standards have experienced that, that can't ever happen. And money, that's always the big one, because you're talking benefits and sign-on bonuses and things that go along with it. Everybody's doing it. You have to focus on what sets you apart. And it's not a competition of which agency can have the largest sign-on bonus. Who, like Eric said, who's that really bringing to your organization? Is that the character of the individual that you want to bring into your organization? It probably shouldn't be. I'm not saying that person that says, wow, they have a larger sign-on bonus than this one, I'm going to go here, is the wrong person, but it could be. You're running at risk, right? It's risk versus gain in that situation, and you need to weigh that. You need to focus on your culture, highlight your culture, and yeah, be equitable across the board. You're going to have to be equitable to get those eyes turned your direction in benefits and in pay and bonuses, but that shouldn't be the sole driving factor. And you shouldn't look for that individual that is their sole driving factor.
Greg, you have anything you've seen different as far as the lowering standards, or just in general, maybe even people that ignore certain, maybe tattoos, whatever have you, I think it goes back what you're talking about, though. Instead of broadening, keeping that narrow scope, looking for the right fit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at, and I always say, trust nobody, all others bring data. If you look at the data that supports what we were talking about as far as the standards aspect, it, right now just over, I think it's around, and I run numbers at every single agency that I work with. Around 63% of individuals that are coming into the industry are actually coming from a referral. Now, it doesn't have to be from the agency, but it has to be somebody that's influencing them to apply. Meaning that somebody put eyes on them, said, hey, you would be a fantastic fit for this, therefore you go through. Then fast forward through the process, those actually make it through the process at an 80% greater clip than anybody else. Why? Because somebody's already vetted them. So all of that is leading back to the exact same thing. It's like garbage in, garbage out. How do we get good people into the top of the funnel? And then how do we get them through a smooth process? So Eric brought up something, and it literally I almost had a visceral response to it, not in a negative way, but I just experienced it at an agency last week. I was at a state agency. I was doing advanced recruiter training, and we were going through their process. And I said, hey, at the end of the day, these people that are going to this physical fitness exam, ultimately, what are we doing with them, like in the process? And they said, well, nothing. The process takes over. I said, wait a second. Why are we not calling them on the front end to make them feel good? And ultimately, and they said, well, that's like 50 people. And I said, okay, there's 5 of us. That's 10 phone calls a piece to make a quick 2-minute interaction and then make them feel desired. But what you're doing is at every segment, at every stage, you're ultimately gauging what do you have there. Well, we had this gentleman, if anybody on this call looked at what this guy was, so former military, I think he might have been an SF guy. At the end of the day, all the bells and whistles. So one of the recruiters makes a phone call to him, and he's just to confirm, like, hey, we dropped off the planet here. Are you showing to the fitness test? And at the end of the day, where's the background packet that you were supposed to turn in? This gentleman goes off. Like, I'm done playing your games. You guys need me way more than I need you. This. Within that 2-minute phone call, this guy showed his true colors, and they were able to save the agency 12 hours of work to get rid of him, because a leopard doesn't change its spots, right? And they were comfortable, and the lieutenant and the captain of the unit were both in the room, and they witnessed it in real time, said, yep, absolutely, get rid of them. Because we chose the human aspect instead of letting the process just play itself out, and we chose to engage, we were able to just to not only save time and energy, but also a valuable resource, and get rid of something that would have clogged the system. Because guess what? Come background, that would have gotten figured out, and it would have changed everything. But then just pulling it full circle, we have to change the way we think, the way that we operationalize agencies and organizations from a recruitment standpoint. And I want to touch on one last thing, because we didn't even talk about this prior to, but it's so very important. And that is this. When Chief referenced the lateral transfer bonuses and all that is cancerous. Like, hey, everybody, let's just be honest, everyone's underpaid. We know that. And that's likely never going to change. Hopefully agencies are getting better and getting more. But the lateral transfers, I would say one of 2 things is going to happen. Money's going to run out from the city, the township, whatever, at some point, and that's no longer going to be the case. But the flip side is, why are we doing it? What's happening is people are luring other individuals over. So the lateral transfers is killing really what is an industry that was built on loyalty, built on trust, built on sustainability, on all of those, intrinsic values that most people in the industry now have. We're bastardizing that with that evolution. And now we're stealing from our neighbor. Each and every time we do that, we're ripping at the very core and the very fiber of what the industry was built on. That's part of the reason I've been all over the country doing what I'm doing is, hey, let's stop doing that. And let's get really good at what we can do and how we can operationalize our agency to pull in high value targets, young men and young women that want to serve, that want to be a part of the industry. And at the end of the day, start to build that contagious and infectious culture that Eric and Chief talked about. Because without doing that, without getting really good on the front end and us doing what we do, we're bringing other things in. The W know is better than the W don't. And if you're able to train and operationalize those individuals, they're going to be they're going to have a degree of loyalty to you, provided that you've invested on them in the front end.
That's excellent. I just heard the other day, I was at a conference and an agency had lost 7 of their officers to a neighboring agency. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And it wasn't that large of an agency, so it definitely causes a lot of impact. So one more question I think we can get in. We talked about the lowering standards and the money pieces. What about streamlining the process, modernizing it? We tipped a little bit on it. As far as the speed, how long we're taking to get these applicants in. I think, Travis and I hit on 25, 30 years ago, it might have taken you 6 months to get through a process competing against, 100, 200 people, depending on the size. What are your thoughts on that process and the length of time?
Speed's definitely a thing, and hopefully I can roll a couple things together because I know we're super tight on time, but I think it's important that you make a discernment of being competitive. I think Chief brought this up earlier, right? It's not to say don't do bonuses, but don't think that you're going to fix everything with the highest bonus and cannibalize, right? At the same time, people got to vote with their feet. So if you have a failing culture, failing leadership, then yes, people are going to leave. And people need to see them leave sometimes until they recognize something's not working. We got to change it, right? So when you ask the question about streamlining, I say yes, like you need to be adaptive. You can't just be working with paper files and just calling them, going down the giant list as Greg and Chief nodded to, and just kind of treating everyone like a number. No, you have to be adaptive, right? So you get out in front of it, you meet that person, they're absolutely toxic, you can them, you meet that person, they are thrilled that you reached out. They're asking if they can do a ride along. You're like, oh, love the initiative. Yes, when can you come by, right? And so you're building all these topics that we've covered. You're integrating them all to be extremely adaptive, value, people focused. And I'll leave it at that because I know I want to give these gentlemen some time.
Yeah, I think you have to give every opportunity for it to be as streamlined as possible and make it as easy on the applicants as possible. We are used to we use technology for everything. So take advantage of that and capitalize on that. Look for means and ways to use technology to your advantage to not only speed up your process, but also to make it easier on the applicants to be a part of it. But you cannot rely solely on that. You cannot say that's going to be you still have to maintain that personal contact. You must reach out to them and make them feel valued and wanted. That's what's going to recruit and draw them into your organization is let them know the value they bring to your organization. And so use both. You got to do both sides of it. And I'll be quiet there.
The human touch, Greg, what do you have? The final parting words.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. At the end of the day, you need to take something that we have dehumanized, which is the process itself, and rehumanize it and get people to want to be the police again, get people to want to lean in. And the only way you can do that is through inspiration. It's always say, motivation sits, deep inside somebody. We talked about that earlier. At the end of the day, you see something, you hear something, you read something, but more importantly, you meet someone and that ignites that. And that's why it's so very important to create the human element and bring that back into the fold. Because you're going to see conversion go through the roof. And honestly, it makes your culture sticky, but it's going to make your process smoother because you're going to have identified on the front end who's good, who's bad, and who's indifferent. And then, are you going to have times that you're going to roll the dice because you don't know what you're seeing? Absolutely. We're not completely infallible. Like we're absolutely all fallible. I mean, there was people that I said, hey, this would be an ideal candidate, ideal fit. We'll find out it wasn't. Well, guess what? That's not a me problem. It's just, hey, that guy got one over. It is what it is. But I think the biggest thing and the key takeaway for me is bias to action. It's do something. And do something different, choose a direction, stick with it, and then, stay focused at it. If something doesn't work in the first, week, 2 weeks, 3 days, don't throw it out. Stay the course. And I think that's one thing as like both the gentlemen on the call with me, guys, why I'm so impressed with both of them is they've made a decision, charted a course and stayed on course. And both of them are, achieving success at a high level because of it.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.